I think one thing that's important to recognize is that it's hard to call what happened in Egypt a revolution. There was an uprising, there was a toppling of the regime in the form of the president and his inner circle, but there are many parts of the former regime that are in place, and yet that shouldn't lead us to a conclusion that this has been a failure. I mean, I think what we see in Egypt, different than Tunisia and Libya in its structure and trajectory, but there is a dynamic that has been let loose that I think is hard to retrieve. You can't go back to the status quo ante, and so I think this is a multi-year process. It's not going to be linear progress, but we also should recognize, I think, some of the ways that discourse has changed. Media is freer despite increasing repression and attempts at censorship on the part of the SCAF. There's a wider discourse. There's a wider degree of participation in politics. We are going to have elections, albeit flawed ones. But you see a discourse that I think is leading to something new and different. And we shouldn't fall into the trap of thinking that everything is the same and that the former regime has reconstituted itself, because I don't think that's where we are. And I do think we are headed to somewhere different. And frankly, nobody is actually quite sure, including the SCAF, including the political parties, about where things are headed. And frankly, that uncertainty is unnerving. But in a country where certainty was the sort of guiding principle and key for 60 years, I mean, a little uncertainty might not be such a bad thing, and that it indicates a certain level of contingency in political life and possibility. And so, there are real fears about where this is headed. There's a polarized political debate shaping up along what would be the sort of liberal Islamist lines. There are serious sectarian tensions in the country. The economic situation is quite dire, and I think is a function of the sort of stasis we see in political life. And those are all things that we have to be very concerned about. But all that being said, there is potential now where political life was formerly dead. And so that is something to cling to, and that should provide hope to, I think, a lot of people involved in the political process and citizens writ large.